Democratic calls for impeachment are growing, with revelations from the Mueller report and President Trump rejecting congressional subpoenas. But House Speaker Nancy Pelosi says that's what the president wants, figuring impeachment will backfire on her party. Joining us now from New Hampshire, Congressman and 2020 Democratic presidential candidate Eric Swalwell. Congressman, let's start with the new powers that I discussed with Lindsey Graham that the president is granting to the Attorney General to declassify all secret information about the Russia probe. The special counsel, Robert Mueller, was given 22 months to investigate whether Donald Trump had colluded with the Russians. Why not give the Attorney General the power to conduct this investigation?
Good morning, Chris. And also this Memorial Day weekend, I just want to thank the Gold Star families for their sacrifice of their family members. But, Chris, what concerns me about this order by the president is that he is asking our intelligence community to essentially not do the job that we are asking them to do the next time they may see something like this. This is to put a chilling effect in place. So if you're an FBI agent and you get a tip that a foreign adversary is seeking to help either the Republicans or the Democrats in this upcoming election, you're going to think twice about that because you may be attacked by this president or you may lose your job. And if we step back and look at what happened in 2016, it may not have amounted to the crime of conspiracy, but I don't think anyone can read those 200 pages of contacts that the Trump team had with the Russians and say, oh, we want this to happen again in 2020. But so I think, again, this is an abuse.
I'm going to get to that in a second, but let's go back to the Barr investigation, because some would argue if anybody in the FBI or the intelligence agencies did something wrong, we should find out about it. If they didn't do anything wrong, then the investigation will turn up nothing.
That's right. And the Inspector General's already looking at that. But for the President of the United States to instruct the Attorney General to do that, again, it looks like he's using the Attorney General to be, his personal lawyer rather than having the Attorney General look at whether there are still ongoing threats to our country. And you said the Mueller report, did not find any collusion. We should also remember Mueller did not look at the financial aspect of Donald Trump and his family's dealings with the Russians. That was a red line. We're going to look at that on the Intelligence Committee because we are not convinced that the president is not compromised. So this work continues.
All right. I want to pick up on exactly that because you were one of the Democrats leading the charge for years that the president, his team, colluded with the Russians in the election of 2016. Here you are just days before the Mueller report was handed over to the Attorney General.
Do you believe the president himself colluded with the Russians?
Yes. So the president knew the Russians were seeking to help him, and so he went out as a candidate, invited them to hack more.
You believe there's direct evidence that the president colluded?
His invitation for them to hack more, that's direct evidence of inviting them to collude.
But, Congressman, the special counsel directly contradicts you. Volume 1, page 5 of the report, the investigation did not establish that members of the Trump campaign conspired or coordinated with the Russian government in its election interference activities. Congressman, the Mueller report spent 22 months, looked at all the evidence, says you were wrong.
It did not say that, Chris. Actually, it laid out 200 pages of contacts between the campaigns, and because a prior Congress had a failure of imagination to specifically articulate a crime of collusion doesn't mean a future Congress shouldn't say we don't want this to happen. I respect the special counsel's finding that the laws we have today, and with the limitations of not being able to look at finances, he could not prove beyond a reasonable doubt conspiracy. I don't accept that this is what we want a president or a candidate to do. And so I've written legislation to put an onus on any campaign, family member, or candidate, if they have this type of outreach, they have to tell the FBI.
Let's take a look at the one case you gave there on that MSNBC interview. You said, well, the president called for more hacking. I mean, seriously, I remember that vividly. I think most Americans do. It was in July after the hacking of the DNC. And the president, or then Donald Trump, holds a news conference and says, well, if the Russians want to find those 30,000 emails that Hillary Clinton deleted, I'm sure the media will be interested in that. You can't possibly think that is collusion.
Well, Chris, what did the Russians do next? The Mueller report lays out that they undertook more hacking within hours of that. And this is just a month after the president's son.
You think that was an order from Donald Trump? You don't think the Russians were already,
with the Russians,
in fact, probably already doing it?
I don't believe in... I don't believe in coincidences with the Russians. And your last guest, he used to not believe in coincidences with the Russians until he got too close to Donald Trump.
If Mr. Trump colluded with the Russians, if he obstructed justice, as you claim, both of those you claim, why not move to impeach the president? You're one of the Democrats who is not calling for that yet.
Yeah, and Chris, you just pointed out, no one's going to question how hard I fought while our democracy's been on the line, but I also believe dearly in the rule of law. I was a prosecutor, and I know when I go to court, I got to have my pencil sharpened, my subpoenas ready, and my witnesses and exhibits ready to go. You only get one shot at this. I want to make sure we get it right. I think that means first getting the full Mueller report, unredacted, getting Mueller to testify himself, getting people like Don McGahn in, and so we're pressing that, and we're winning in the courts right now. The president's outnumbered with the subpoena power and the court rulings that are on our side. I think that's the road we go down, but we're not going to do Donald Trump justice here because we only get one shot to make sure the rule of law still stands in America.
Meanwhile, we have this standoff now between Speaker Pelosi and President Trump. She accused him of a cover-up an hour before she was going to meet with him on infrastructure. No concern that if you continue to pursue this, the subpoenas, the insults, the allegations of law-breaking, that you will fail to do the people's business, whether it's infrastructure or funding the government or raising the debt limit?
Yeah, Donald Trump is not the first president, Chris, to be investigated, but he is the first president to be investigated and not be able to work with Congress. Richard Nixon, Bill Clinton, they still had production while there was perceived obstruction. And this president is doing a disservice to the American people by just walking away from our obligation to build roads, green our grid, to work on gun violence. We sent a background check bill over to the Senate, and he's missing that opportunity. I also want to say, Chris, though, that something that doesn't help this debate is the distortion that we're seeing on Facebook or even by Fox Business News by taking what the president is saying about Nancy Pelosi and distorting and altering videos of her to suggest that there's something wrong with her health.
I understand that it's part of moving your bones as a Democrat to attack Fox News. We have you here. We're treating you fairly. Let's move on, okay, yeah. Congressman?
Yeah.
All right.
Yes. Yeah, but it distorts the debate. And it's something the Russians did in the 2016 election. And I just don't think that Facebook and the president should be conducting themselves that way.
All right. Well, we'll talk about Facebook and the president. You're one of the 24 Democrats running for president, and I want to put up on the screen the latest polls because nationally, we have you at 0%. We don't. That's the latest Monmouth University poll, and you're at 1% in Iowa, which is the state where you were born. Question, sir, why run for president when there are so many candidates? I guess it's 24 now, Democratic candidates, and you're so far behind.
Yeah. Well, Chris, you know, I'm from the generation that is paying the price on climate change. I took my kid to school for orientation last week, and I saw, you know, while I was taking him to school, I was thinking about things that most parents didn't have to think about a generation before, which is whether he's going to be safe or not. And when it comes to our health care, we're paying so much out of our pocket today that I feel a responsibility to run. I was the first in the family to go to college, but I see that my generation is going to do worse than the next generation, and I'm going to do something about that, and I'm not going to give up. It's early in the race, and I'm going to keep fighting.
Congressman Swalwell, thank you. Thanks for your time. Safe travels on the campaign trail, sir.
My pleasure. Thanks, Chris.